In 1987, a teenage girl vanished in a quiet town, and police closed her case in just days. But 30 years later, a buried secret near an old bridge would expose a truth the town tried to hide. In the fall of 1987, the small town of Willow Creek looked like a place frozen in time. It was the kind of town where neighbors waved from their porches, where children rode bicycles until sunset, and where nothing truly bad was supposed to happen. The streets were quiet, lined with tall maple trees that turned bright orange every October. At night, the town felt peaceful, almost too quiet. People believed Willow Creek was safe. That belief would soon be shattered. Lisa Harper, a 17-year-old high school senior, was one of the most familiar faces in town. She had shoulder-length brown hair, soft eyes, and a gentle smile that made people trust her instantly. Teachers described her as responsible and polite. Friends remembered her as someone who listened more than she spoke. Lisa had simple dreams. She wanted to become a nurse one day. She often told her mother she wanted to help people, to make a difference somewhere beyond Willow Creek. But until graduation came, she stayed busy balancing school and her part-time job at Harper's Diner, a small restaurant near the center of town. The diner was known for its warm lights and homemade pies. Truck drivers stopped there late at night, and locals gathered there every morning for coffee and gossip. Lisa had been working there for almost a year, saving money for college. On October 12, 1987, the day started like any other. Lisa attended school, laughed with friends in the hallway, and stayed after class to finish homework in the library. Nothing about that day seemed unusual. No warning signs. No strange feelings. Just another normal Monday. That evening, Lisa arrived at the diner just before her shift started at 5:00 p.m. The smell of frying onions and fresh coffee filled the air as she tied on her apron and greeted customers. "Evening, Lisa," said Mary Collins, the diner manager. "Hi, Mary," Lisa replied with a smile. The night went by quickly. Lisa served burgers, refilled coffee cups, and joked with regular customers. Outside, the temperature dropped as the autumn wind grew colder. The sky turned dark earlier than usual, and a thin fog began forming along the edges of town. Around 9:45 p.m., business slowed. Lisa wiped down tables and stacked clean dishes. She glanced at the clock, eager to head home and rest before school the next day. At 10:02 p.m., her shift ended. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it in her locker. Before leaving, she grabbed her denim jacket and stepped toward the back door. "See you tomorrow," Mary called. "Good night," Lisa answered. Those were the last words anyone at the diner would ever hear from her. Outside, the air felt colder than expected. A faint mist hung over the parking lot, making the streetlights glow in soft yellow circles. Lisa hugged her jacket tighter around herself and began the short walk home. Her house was only 10 minutes away. She had walked the same route hundreds of times, past the gas station, across Maple Street, and along a quiet stretch of road that led to her neighborhood. Normally, the walk felt safe. But that night, something felt different. As Lisa passed the diner parking lot, a vehicle sat near the far corner. It was an older truck, dark in color, with its headlights turned off. The engine appeared to be running, though no one could clearly see who was inside. Lisa noticed it. She slowed her steps slightly. For a moment, she considered turning back into the diner. But the thought passed quickly. Willow Creek was safe, she reminded herself. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. She continued walking. The wind picked up, rustling fallen leaves across the pavement. The sound echoed through the empty street, making the silence feel heavier. Then, somewhere behind her, a car door shut. Lisa turned her head slightly, but the darkness made it hard to see anything clearly. She kept walking. Faster this time. At 10:15 p.m., a neighbor later reported hearing what sounded like tires rolling quickly down Maple Street. But no one looked outside. No one thought anything was wrong. Back at home, Janet Harper, Lisa's mother, waited in the living room with the television quietly playing in the background. She checked the clock again. 10:20 p.m. Lisa should have been home by now. Janet tried not to worry. Maybe Lisa had stopped to talk with a friend. Maybe she stayed late at work. Still, something didn't feel right. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. By 11:00 p.m., Janet's calm began turning into fear. She picked up the phone and called the diner. Mary answered. "Hi, Mary, is Lisa still there?" Mary paused. "No, she left over an hour ago." Janet's heart dropped. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Mary replied. She walked out right after her shift ended. Janet hung up the phone slowly. Her hands trembled. She walked to the front window and looked out into the empty street. The wind pushed dry leaves across the road, making scratching sounds against the pavement. Midnight came. Lisa was still missing. That was when Janet finally called the police. Just after 12:30 a.m., Officer Daniel Morris arrived at the Harper home. He stepped inside calmly, writing notes as Janet explained everything. Lisa's routine, her work shift, the short walk home. Officer Morris listened carefully, but his expression remained relaxed. "Teenagers run off sometimes," he said. "She'll probably be back by morning." But morning came, and Lisa Harper never returned home. By sunrise, Willow Creek up to a nightmare it never expected. Search teams formed. Volunteers gathered. Flashlights moved through nearby woods. Police cars cruised through quiet streets. But there were no signs of Lisa. No footprints. No dropped belongings. No witnesses who saw what happened. It was as if Lisa Harper had simply vanished into the night. And while the town believed the search had only begun, something far more troubling was already happening behind closed doors. Because unknown to the Harper family, the truth about Lisa's disappearance was already being hidden. The days following Lisa Harper's disappearance were filled with noise, movement, and false hope. Volunteers gathered early each morning in the parking lot outside Harper's diner. Men carried flashlights. Women brought thermoses filled with coffee. Teenagers passed out flyers with Lisa's smiling photo printed in black and white. At first, the entire town seemed united. They searched the nearby woods, walked along riverbanks, and knocked on doors asking if anyone had seen anything unusual on the night of October 12, 1987. But as days passed, the energy began to fade. By the fourth day, fewer volunteers showed up. By the seventh day, only close friends and family remained. And by the 10th day, something strange began to happen. The police search slowed. Janet Harper noticed it immediately. Fewer officers were assigned to the case. Patrol cars stopped driving through Lisa's usual walking route. Even the flyers that once covered the town began disappearing, torn down or fading in the rain. Janet refused to accept it. She visited the police station daily, asking the same question. "Have you found anything?" Each time, the answer was the same. No new leads. Officer Daniel Morris, the same officer who first responded to Lisa's disappearance, handled most of the communication with Janet. His tone remained calm, almost too calm. "We believe Lisa may have left town willingly," he said during one visit. Janet stared at him in disbelief. "My daughter would never run away," she replied. "She has school, work, her whole life is here." Morris simply nodded and wrote something in his notebook. But he never explained what he was writing. Weeks passed, and the investigation slowly turned cold. To the rest of Willow Creek, life began returning to normal. Shops reopened. School dances resumed. Children played outside again. But inside the Harper home, nothing felt normal. Lisa's bedroom remained untouched. Her schoolbooks stayed on her desk. Her denim jacket, an extra one she rarely wore, still hung in the closet. Janet refused to move anything. She believed Lisa would come back. She had to. Then, nearly 7 years later, something unexpected happened. It was the summer of 1994, and Willow Creek was quieter than ever. Janet still lived in the same house, still hoping for answers. One evening, just after 8:00 p.m., the phone rang. Janet answered without thinking. "Hello." For a moment, there was silence. Then a voice spoke, low, nervous, almost whispering. "They didn't look hard enough." Janet froze. "Who is this?" she asked. But the voice ignored her question. "Ask about the bridge," the caller said. "Ask what they found there." Before Janet could respond, the line went dead. She stood still, holding the phone tightly, her heart pounding against her chest. The bridge. There was only one bridge in Willow Creek. The old Ravenwood Bridge, located just outside town. It crossed a narrow river surrounded by thick trees and rocky ground. Years earlier, teenagers often gathered there to talk, laugh, and carve their initials into the wooden railing. Lisa used to visit that bridge with her best friend, Megan Ross. The next morning, Janet reported the call to the police. Officer Morris listened as she explained every word. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Probably a prank," he said casually. "We get calls like that sometimes." Janet frowned. "But what if it isn't?" she asked. Morris shrugged. "There's no reason to believe the bridge is connected to Lisa's disappearance." His answer felt too quick, too dismissive, and for the first time in years, Janet felt something stronger than sadness. She felt suspicion. Later that afternoon, Janet decided to visit Ravenwood Bridge herself. The drive there felt longer than she remembered. The road curved through tall trees that blocked most of the sunlight, making the area feel colder and darker than the rest of town. When she stepped out of her car, the sound of rushing water filled the air. The bridge looked old and worn, its wooden boards cracked with age. Janet walked slowly across it, running her fingers along the railing. That was when she saw them. Faded initials carved deep into the wood: L.H. Lisa Harper. Janet felt tears fill her eyes. She remembered the day Lisa proudly showed her those letters years ago, laughing as she described how she and Megan carved them with a pocket knife. For a moment, Janet allowed herself to remember Lisa as she once was, alive, smiling, hopeful. But that peaceful moment ended quickly. As Janet leaned slightly over the railing, her eyes caught something unusual below the bridge. Something shiny, half buried in thick mud near the riverbank. Curious, she carefully climbed down the rocky slope toward the water. The ground felt slippery beneath her shoes. She moved slowly, holding onto tree branches for support. When she reached the edge of the riverbank, she knelt down and brushed away dirt from the object. Her breath caught. It was a silver bracelet, thin, delicate, familiar. Janet picked it up with trembling hands. She didn't need to look closely to recognize it. Lisa had worn that bracelet almost every day. It had been a birthday gift from Janet just 1 year before Lisa disappeared. For a moment, Janet couldn't move. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Lisa had been there. Somehow, something connected to her disappearance had been left behind at Ravenwood Bridge. Janet rushed back to her car and drove straight to the police station. When she handed the bracelet to Officer Morris, he examined it silently. His face showed no emotion. "We'll send this to the lab," he said. Days passed, then weeks. Finally, Janet returned to the station for answers. Officer Morris handed the bracelet back to her. "The lab couldn't confirm it belongs to Lisa," he said flatly. Janet stared at him. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I bought this for her myself." Morris shrugged again. "There's nothing more we can do." No report was shown. No lab paperwork was provided. Just words. Empty words. As Janet left the station that day, holding the bracelet tightly in her hand, a cold realization settled deep inside her mind. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. Something was wrong. Something had been ignored or hidden, and for the very first time since Lisa vanished, Janet Harper began to wonder if the people she trusted most were the very ones keeping the truth buried. Nearly 30 years passed after Lisa Harper disappeared. In Willow Creek, time seemed to move forward, but memories stayed frozen in quiet corners. New families moved into town. Old buildings were replaced. Children who once searched for Lisa as teenagers were now adults with children of their own. But for Janet Harper, time never truly moved. Lisa's bedroom remained almost exactly the same. Her posters still hung on the wall. Her schoolbooks gathered dust on the shelf. Every year on October 12th, Janet lit a candle near Lisa's photograph and whispered the same words. "I'm still looking for you." Most people believed Lisa's case was forgotten. But in 2016, someone new discovered her story. His name was Ethan Cole, a 29-year-old investigative journalist working for a small documentary company. Ethan had built a reputation for digging into cold cases, especially ones that didn't make sense. He believed that every missing person deserved answers. One rainy afternoon, Ethan sat at his desk reviewing old case files from across the country. He had requested dozens of unsolved cases from state archives, hoping to find something worth investigating. That was when he noticed a thin brown folder labeled Harper, Lisa, Missing Person, 1987. He picked it up, expecting to see hundreds of pages. Instead, he found only 8. 8 thin pages held together with a rusted paperclip. Ethan frowned. Most missing person cases included witness interviews, search reports, forensic notes, and photographs. Even simple cases filled entire folders. But Lisa Harper's file felt incomplete. Suspiciously incomplete. He flipped through the pages slowly. The report listed Lisa's name, age, height, and last known location, the diner where she worked. There was a short description of her disappearance, and a few notes about the early search efforts. But something was missing. Actually, many things were missing. There were no detailed witness statements, no search maps, no follow-up reports, and most importantly, no explanation of why the case was closed so quickly. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered to himself. He continued reading until he reached the final page. At the bottom, he noticed a faded signature, Officer Daniel Morris. The name meant nothing to Ethan at the time, but it would soon become impossible to forget. Curious and unsettled, Ethan searched for more information online. He found a few old newspaper articles about Lisa's disappearance, but they were brief and lacked detail. Then he found something that made his heart beat faster. An article dated October 14, 1987, just 2 days after Lisa vanished. Mentioned a dark, colored truck seen near the diner late that night. Witnesses reportedly described the vehicle as idling near the parking lot. Ethan quickly checked Lisa's official police file again. There was no mention of any truck. None. That was the moment Ethan realized this case wasn't just forgotten. It had been altered. Determined to learn more, Ethan packed his camera, notebook and recorder. A week later, he drove toward Willow Creek, unsure of what he would find. As he entered the town, he noticed how quiet everything felt. The streets were clean. Storefronts looked old but well kept. It looked like the kind of place where crime didn't belong. But appearances could be misleading. Ethan checked into a small roadside motel and began asking questions the next morning. At first, people avoided him. When he mentioned Lisa Harper's name, conversations stopped. Some residents changed the subject. Others simply walked away. It was as if speaking her name still carried fear. After hours of searching, Ethan finally found someone willing to talk. Megan Ross, Lisa's childhood best friend. Megan now lived in a small house at the edge of town, surrounded by tall weeds and a rusted fence. When Ethan knocked on her door, it took several minutes before it slowly opened. Megan stood there, her face pale and tired. "Yes," she asked cautiously. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said. "I'm investigating Lisa Harper's disappearance." At the sound of Lisa's name, Megan's expression changed. Fear. Real fear. "I can't help you," she said quickly. But Ethan didn't leave. "You were her best friend," he said gently. "You knew her better than anyone." Megan hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the door. After a long silence, she finally stepped aside. "Come in," she whispered. Inside, the house felt quiet and dim. Dust covered the furniture, and old photographs lined the walls. Ethan sat across from Megan at a small kitchen table. "Do you remember the night Lisa disappeared?" he asked. Megan stared at the table without answering.
"Yes,"
she finally said. "I remember everything." Her voice sounded distant. "Then tell me," Ethan said. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with something deeper than sadness. "Fear." "You shouldn't dig into this," she whispered. "Some things are better left buried." The words sent a chill through Ethan's body. Better left buried. Why would someone still be afraid after nearly 30 years? That question stayed in his mind as he left Megan's house later that afternoon. That evening, Ethan returned to his motel room and reviewed his notes again. Something about Megan's reaction bothered him. She wasn't just sad, she was terrified. The next morning, Ethan visited the town library, searching through old newspaper archives stored on microfilm. Hour after hour, he scanned headlines from October 1987. Then he found it. A small article buried on the third page of an old newspaper. The headline read, "Police question witness about suspicious vehicle." Ethan read every word carefully. According to the article, a local resident reported seeing a dark truck parked near Harper's diner shortly before Lisa disappeared. The witness even described hearing a car door slam. Ethan leaned closer to the screen. That detail sounded familiar. He remembered reading about a neighbor hearing something similar the night Lisa vanished. Yet none of this information existed in the official police file. It had been removed, deleted, hidden. Ethan felt a cold realization settle over him. This wasn't just a poorly handled case. Someone had deliberately erased evidence. Later that day, Ethan visited the Willow Creek Police Department. The building looked old but well maintained. Inside, a young officer greeted him politely. "I'm looking for archived records from 1987. Ethan explained. The officer disappeared into a back room for several minutes before returning. "Those records were lost," he said casually. "Lost," Ethan repeated. "Storage accident," the officer replied. "Water damage." Ethan stared at him. Lost records. Missing witness reports. Hidden evidence. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. As Ethan stepped outside the station, the sky above Willow Creek turned gray, heavy clouds rolling in. Rain began falling moments later. Standing there, watching water strike the pavement, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He wouldn't stop. Not until he uncovered the truth, because somewhere in Willow Creek, beneath years of silence and fear, a secret was waiting. And the deeper he dug, the clearer one thing became. Lisa Harper's disappearance was never just a mystery. It was a story someone had worked very hard to hide. By the time Ethan Cole entered the fourth week of his investigation, he realized Willow Creek was hiding more secrets than he first imagined. The missing reports, the frightened residents, the erased witness statements. None of it felt like coincidence anymore. Something had happened in 1987 that people were still afraid to talk about, and Ethan was determined to find out what. One cold morning, he returned to the Willow Creek Public Library, a quiet brick building that smelled of old paper and dust. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Dalton, had begun recognizing him by now. "You're back again," she said with a soft smile. "Yes," Ethan replied. "I'm looking for anything from 1987. Construction records, town projects, anything unusual." Mrs. Dalton nodded slowly and led him toward the archives room at the back of the library. Inside, metal cabinets lined the walls, each filled with folders labeled by year. "Take your time," she said. Ethan began searching through stacks of documents, flipping through faded records one by one. Most of them were boring, budget reports, zoning approvals, routine paperwork. But then, nearly 2 hours later, he found something that made him stop. A folder labeled, Willow Creek Highway Expansion Project, 1987. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside were detailed maps showing plans to build a new highway just outside town. The project would have cut through land near Ravenwood Bridge, the same location mentioned in the mysterious phone call Janet received years earlier. He continued reading. The project had been approved in early October 1987. Construction began on October 10th. Then, suddenly, it stopped on October 24th. Just 12 days after Lisa disappeared. Ethan leaned closer to the page. The official reason listed was short and vague. Safety concerns halted excavation. No explanation. No details. Nothing specific. That alone was suspicious. But what truly caught Ethan's attention was a handwritten note in the corner of one document. Site secured by local authorities. Why would police secure a construction site? Ethan made copies of the documents and left the library with a growing sense of urgency. Someone, somewhere, knew the truth, and he needed to find them. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove to a nearby trailer park where several retired construction workers were known to live. He had tracked down a name from the project records: Waterbriggs, a former excavation worker who had worked on the highway project in 1987. Walter's trailer sat at the end of a narrow dirt road. Rusted tools lay scattered outside, and an old pickup truck was parked beside the door. Ethan knocked. After a few seconds, the door opened slowly. Walter Briggs stood there, older now, his gray hair thin and uneven. His face looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Yes?" Walter asked cautiously. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said. "I'm investigating the highway project from 1987. Walter's expression changed immediately. Not anger, not confusion. Fear. "You should leave," Walter said quickly. "I just need to ask one question." Ethan replied calmly. "Why was the project shut down?" Walter hesitated. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "Not here," he whispered. "Walk with me." They moved a short distance away from the trailer, standing near a cluster of trees where no one else could hear. Walter took a deep breath before speaking. "Why, found something out there," he said quietly. Ethan's pulse quickened. "What did you find?" he asked. Walter looked around nervously, as if expecting someone to appear. "A hole," he said. "Looked like someone had dug it before we got there." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "What was inside?" Walter swallowed hard. "Bones," he whispered. The word hung in the air like a heavy weight. "Human bones." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Did you report it?" he asked. Walter nodded slowly. "Of course we did. The site supervisor called the police right away." "What happened next?" Ethan asked. Walter's voice lowered even further. "The police showed up fast. Faster than usual." He paused, shaking his head as if reliving the memory. "They told us to stop digging immediately." Walter continued. "Said they'd handle everything from there." "Did they investigate the site?" Ethan asked. Walter let out a quiet laugh. "That's the strange part," he said. "They didn't stay long. Just covered the hole and told us the project was finished." "Finished," Ethan repeated. Walter nodded. "Next day, we were told to pack up and leave. No explanation. No follow-up, nothing." Ethan felt a chill run through his body. "Did anyone else question it?" he asked. Walter shook his head. "People in Willow Creek didn't question police back then," he said. "Still don't." Ethan thanked Walter and returned to his car, his thoughts racing. Bones discovered. Construction halted. Police securing the site. Everything pointed back to Ravenwood Bridge. That night, under the cover of darkness, Ethan drove toward the bridge once again. The road felt empty and silent. The headlights from his car cut through the darkness as tall trees surrounded him on both sides. When he arrived, he parked his car and stepped out with a flashlight and camera. The sound of rushing water echoed beneath the bridge. Ethan followed the maps he had copied earlier, walking along the edge of the forest where the construction site once existed. After several minutes, he noticed something unusual. A patch of ground where the soil looked different from the surrounding area. Darker, harder, uneven, as if it had been disturbed and later covered up. His heart pounded as he knelt down. Using his hands he brushed away loose dirt. At first, he saw nothing. Then his fingers touched something solid, smooth, cold. He moved the soil aside carefully, and that was when his flashlight revealed something pale beneath the dirt. Bone, a human bone. Ethan froze, staring at it in disbelief. For years, the truth had been buried beneath the soil of Willow Creek. Hidden, ignored, protected. But now it had finally been found. Ethan stepped back slowly, his hands shaking. If this bone belonged to Lisa Harper, then everything the town believed for nearly 30 years was a lie. And somewhere in Willow Creek, someone knew exactly how it got there. The moment Ethan Cole uncovered the bone beneath the soil near Ravenwood Bridge, everything changed. His hands trembled as he stepped back, staring at the pale object half buried in the dirt. The beam from his flashlight shook slightly as he tried to steady his breath. For nearly 30 years, this place had hidden something. Something terrible. Ethan knew he couldn't touch anything further. If this truly was human remains, the site needed to be handled carefully. He pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. "This is Ethan Cole," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I believe I've found human remains near Ravenwood Bridge." Within 30 minutes, police vehicles arrived, their flashing lights breaking the darkness of the quiet forest. Officers quickly secured the area with yellow tape, pushing Ethan back while investigators examined the ground. Word spread fast through Willow Creek. By sunrise, the town buzzed with whispers. People gathered near the edge of the forest, watching silently as forensic teams worked carefully with shovels and brushes. No one spoke loudly. No one laughed. It felt like the town already knew what they were about to discover. Over the next 2 days, investigators carefully excavated the area. Layer by layer, the soil was removed. Then came the confirmation everyone feared. More bones were found. Not just one, but an entire skeleton buried beneath the earth. The remains appeared small, consistent with a teenage girl. Ethan watched from a distance, his chest tight with emotion. He knew what this meant. After decades of uncertainty, Lisa Harper had finally been found. A few days later, dental records confirmed it. The remains belonged to Lisa Harper. The announcement shook Willow Creek to its core. For years, many residents believed Lisa had run away or been taken by a stranger passing through town. Now the truth was undeniable. Lisa had never left Willow Creek. She had been there all along. Buried, hidden beneath the ground just outside town. Janet Harper received the news quietly. She sat in her living room, holding Lisa's photograph as investigators explained the results. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained calm. "I knew she was still here," she whispered. "I never stopped believing." But the investigation was far from over. Because buried with Lisa, investigators found something unexpected. Inside the remains of her jacket pocket, preserved by layers of soil, was a small metal object. A badge. A police badge. The discovery stunned everyone. The badge was carefully cleaned and examined. It carried a name engraved across the front, Officer Daniel Morris, the same officer who had responded to Lisa's disappearance in 1987. The same officer who dismissed Janet's concerns. The same officer who claimed the bracelet found near Ravenwood Bridge could not be linked to Lisa. Suspicion quickly turned into action. Authorities reopened the case and began reviewing old records, many of which were incomplete or missing. Former officers who worked in Willow Creek during the 1980s were questioned. Some claimed they remembered little. Others admitted they had doubts back then, but were told to remain silent. Then came the most shocking development. Megan Ross, Lisa's childhood best friend, came forward. For years, Megan had lived quietly at the edge of town, avoiding attention and refusing to discuss the past. But now, with Lisa's remains discovered, she could no longer stay silent. During questioning, Megan finally told investigators what she had hidden for decades. On the night Lisa disappeared, Megan had gone to Ravenwood Bridge alone to think. It was a place she and Lisa often visited together. While standing near the railing, she saw headlights approaching. A dark truck pulled up. At first, she didn't think much of it. But then she saw something that froze her in place. Lisa stood near the truck, and beside her was Officer Daniel Morris. They were arguing. Megan remembered Lisa's voice sounding scared and angry. She couldn't hear every word, but she heard enough to know something was wrong. She remembered one sentence clearly. "Leave me alone," Lisa shouted. Megan panicked. Instead of stepping forward, she hid behind nearby trees, afraid of being seen. Moments later, she heard a loud sound, like something heavy striking metal, then silence, complete silence. Terrified, Megan ran home without telling anyone what she saw. For years, guilt followed her, but fear kept her quiet. She believed no one would trust her word against a police officer. Megan's statement gave investigators the evidence they needed. Authorities located Daniel Morris, now an elderly man living quietly in another state. He was brought back to Willow Creek for questioning. At first, Morris denied everything. He claimed he barely remembered Lisa Harper's case. But investigators had more than words. They found Morris's old truck in a storage facility connected to his family. Though rusted and unused for years, forensic testing revealed fibers inside the vehicle. Those fibers matched fragments found on Lisa's clothing. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The truth could no longer be hidden. Daniel Morris was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder. The town of Willow Creek struggled to accept the reality. For decades, they trusted the very man responsible for protecting them. And yet, he had been hiding the truth all along. During the final court hearing, Janet Harper sat quietly in the front row. Her hands rested on her lap, holding a photograph of Lisa as a teenager. When the judge asked if she wished to speak, Janet slowly stood. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "For 30 years I waited," she said. "I prayed every day that my daughter would be found." She paused, tears filling her eyes. "I never stopped believing she was waiting to come home." Silence filled the courtroom. Even the judge lowered his gaze. Though no sentence could truly bring justice to Lisa, the truth had finally surfaced. Lisa Harper was no longer a missing girl. She was no longer a forgotten case. She was finally seen, finally heard, finally found. And Willow Creek would never be the same again, because the town had learned a painful lesson. Sometimes the darkest secrets aren't buried by strangers. They're buried by the people you trust the most.